Hello and welcome back to Beaters, Drivers, and Survivors. And today we learn yet again another amazing feat of automotive innovation that the 61 Buick Skylark has accomplished. No, it's not the triangulated rear suspension. No, it's not the innovative 215 cubic inch all aluminum V8. It's the sheer amount of rubber fuel hose used on the car from the factory. This car has an overabundance of rubber hose in the back connecting the gas tank to the fuel line, the hard line underneath the car. So I want to eliminate that rubber hose. It's a lot. I mean, we'll go under there and I'll show it to you. But what I'm going to do right now to resolve it is I picked up a piece of 5/16 fuel line that I'm going to bend into the shape to get up over the rear axle to replace all of that rubber hose that's under there. I also picked up some 5/16 rubber hose to make my connections way more than I need, but I like to just keep a lot of it on hand. That way when I work on any little project where I have to have rubber fuel hose, I have it in my inventory. I also picked up some hose clamps, which I'll need for the back. If I'd be doing this from the start, I would take the time to bend my own fuel line from the front clear to the back all in one piece. But again, I just need to get this thing on the road. And there was a lot of rubber hose back there from the factory, but just in my opinion, way too much of it. So we're going to get started and try to bend some of this up. But let me get you under the car so you can see how this thing looks. Here's the rubber hose I'm referring to. So it comes through, there's a connection, not a connection, but a clamp right there to hold it against the frame rail. It comes up here, up over the control arm. Right here it's still traveling, goes down the frame rail, and it should connect to this point right here that I have a little cap on to keep the junk off. If you remember when I put the tank up there, I put the little cap on there. This goes to the sending unit. But that is a lot of rubber hose to me. So the connection point is right there, where it runs along the frame rail then all the way to the front of the car. So that's what we're going to try to eliminate. We're going to bend some hard line just to put a little less rubber hose back in here. Rubber hose tends to harden, or I've already had it where the fuel pump is pulling and you can suck it shut. So that's the stuff I'd like to eliminate in redoing this here. And I just like the hard line much better than the rubber hose. Okay, we're going to get started. We're going to start bending up a little template using some of my copper nickel brake line as a template just to get the general shape over some of the areas around the control arm that are a little bit tougher to bend. And then I'll carry that template over and start bending my steel line that I got to replace the rubber hose. The manual states, the shop manual for a 1961 Buick, the fuel line is partially internal corrosion resistant metal line and partly synthetic rubber hose. What it should really say is part of the car uses corrosion resistant metal line, but most of it uses rubber hose. I've never owned a car that had this much rubber hose used on it from the factory. It's crazy. So this one, obviously, it was spliced at some point. They're two pieces together and they put a little piece of metal line here between. But the shop manual even shows this much used. Let me show you this. So this is the shop manual. And in here you can see there's a dark black line. That's the metal. And right there the metal stops. And now it's all rubber, going all the way back to there.
That's crazy.
Whew. All right. So instead of going up, down, up, down, up, down, out, underneath the car and back out, I laid under there and bent this underneath the car as I carefully fitted it. And this is how the crazy line will look. And let me see if I can get this orientation right. It's going to sit in there like that. This crazy wacky bend here is to go around the area where the coil spring sits in that pocket. So it didn't turn out too bad. And either way, it's much better than having all of this be rubber. One thing I do want to do, the way I started this was so I could utilize the flare here so that when you slip the hose over it, it gives a better area, a better surface to seal on. So what I'll do here is I will use my flare tool, and we're going to do the same thing to this end right here. So to ensure that it seals better when we put the rubber hose on it. So we'll go to the workbench and make a flare. Before we make our flare, we need to deburr this. So we'll use our deburring tool. Right now we're getting rid of the burrs on the outside of the tube. Now we'll use the other side of our tool. And we'll deburr the inside of the tube. So that's looking pretty good right there. Now we'll get the tube here loaded up in our Eastwood flare tool. So we want to start off on this operation 0. Lay our tube in here. Make sure you have the right dies, of course. And these are the 5/16 dies. And then I like to just lightly snug the tool down. Slide it in there so that it's flush. Now we're going to snug this all the way down. Turn this guy to 5/16 operation 1. Always make sure this is snug. Okay. Now, I'm just kind of curious here. I might not do a double flare here. There's really no need, and I might like this better as a single flare. You know what? I think I like that better than a double. So it just created enough bump on it that that hose will seal. Compared to the other side. The other side uses the factory double flare. Yeah, that with a much thinner surface to seal on. When the single is a little bit of a broader sealing surface to it. And smoother. You know, I think I'm going to cut the other side of the line and do a single flare on that side as well. I really like this. That's what we'll do. So the rubber hose, that was held in place by these little clamps. I'll take the same approach I believe I got these clamps here from Harbor Freight, but I'll be using these, the little 5/16 guys, on my new hard fuel line and attach it to the frame rail in the exact same locations as the factory rubber. Here's the hard line. Right there you can see the hard line for the center of the car. That runs up to the front. Here's the piece I made. Attached it to the factory frame rail hole. That was for the rubber. Then I have it really tight here against the floor, above the upper control arm. There you can see another area. I used the factory mount. Then up along the top, around the spring pocket. And then I brought it down the frame rail, hitting another factory hole that the rubber was attached to where it comes in. Here is the sending unit, and there is the end of my line. And that's the spot where I just did that single flare. Pull this little cap off. There you can see it, and it'll just be a really, really short segment of hose right here to mate those two together. And the same goes for in the front here. That's going to be a very, where is it? There we go. A very small piece of 5/16 rubber hose. And what I did, I tweaked my new line so that it wouldn't be a 90-degree coming into there. It's going to just be a very, very mild bend coming into, or mild curve coming into that original line. So this should work out pretty well. Rubber hose connected in the back here. Here's the tube coming from the sending unit, and up here's the new line I put in, and very short little segment of hose here, and that's all set to go. I did keep it up here on the high side so that when I do a pipe right here, that I have enough clearance and I don't have to worry about it being too close to the fuel line. I'll show you here up in the front, my connection in the front. The finished connection in the front that's joining this direction here is going towards the front of the car. So this is the factory line. Here's the rubber hose. I did cut it a little bit too long, so you can see it's overlapped here further back quite a bit from this clamp. But here's where that single flare is located. So I put the clamp directly behind that, and then I just left the extra hose on there. You can see it right here, just a very nice curve. It's not kinked at all. And then this mates up to my new steel line that I installed and goes back to the sending unit. Now on to the front. So here we have the rubber fuel line. You can see it connecting to the pump right there, this guy here. That's what was going into my little auxiliary tank I was using to run the car. So we have to remove the fuel line here and connect it to, you can see this is the hard line right here. That's the fuel line poking out there from the inner fender. So I'm going to pull that off, and then what I'm going to end up doing is I am going to take the line that's already attached to the fuel pump here, and I'm going to cut it to length and reattach it to the factory line. Fuel line in the front is all attached. You can see I put in an inline clear filter here just to be able to monitor what type of junk am I pulling from the tank. I mentioned it before. My family and I did clean this tank the best we could, but it's nearly impossible to get all of the junk out of a tank that's this old. So that's why this filter's here, and I'm going to keep an eye on it, and we'll go from there. Another item we have to install here before we can actually take the car for the drive, it's pretty simple, but it's the battery tray. And the funny thing is, with this battery tray, it's kind of odd. It's the oddest one I've seen, like many of the things on this car. But here's the battery tray. I did just spray it with some black paint that I had laying around just to clean it up, because I wire brushed it in here just to get it all clean. But it doesn't just bolt straight down. There's this bracket that goes underneath in the inner fender. and then this hardware passes through the battery tray and into that bracket. But then, since the battery tray is cantilevered over the frame rail, you have to install this bracket in there to support the edge of the battery tray. It's kind of funny, but that's the way they build it. All right, let's install it. Right here's the surface where the battery tray sits. And line up those 3 holes. You can see how it's cantilevered over the frame rail. So it won't sit there by itself, let alone support a battery. So what we need to do is attach this bracket right here to the inner frame rail. Now the holes in here are slotted so that there's some adjustability there. Okay. Took some trial fitment, but these 3 holes here, I have them lining up now. And now the bracket here, which you really have to get this tightened down before you put the tray on, those holes were not lining up. But now, after some adjustment, these 2 are lining up really good, and those 3. So now I can tighten this guy down. Next we'll put these 2 bolts in that slotted bracket and at least get them started. We don't need to torque them down yet, but so looking at the top of this, I'm just trying to figure out how am I going to keep this bracket in place while trying to tighten this thing down. So I put a bolt through from the top, and then what I'll try to do is lay this bracket in like that and hold it in place with a nut on here. I'll need both of my hands, so unfortunately I'll have to put the phone down. But then I think I can get it started from the top so that the hardware passes through these guys. Let's see if it works. There you have it. It worked. It's a pretty funky setup. I just put a couple of lug nuts on there to act as spacers and then put the nut on there, and that's simply just to hold that plate in place so that I can get the bolts started from the top to come into here and there, which then will sandwich the whole assembly so you have your inner fender between the tray up top and this plate underneath. Let's go up top and get those bolts started in there. Yay! It's threading. Okay. Now we can tighten those down. Final 2 pieces of hardware to snug up. Voila! Battery tray's in there. Awesome. make sure this battery fits in here. Right now I won't worry about the hold down. Somewhere in my mess of Buick parts, I have the hold down. Now, that battery is tall, but we should check to see if it'll close without making contact with the underside of the hood. What I'll end up doing, I think what I'll do here, I'm going to put a little bit of red grease on each one of these, close the hood, and see if I'm getting red grease on the underside. It's going to be darn close. Darn close. There we go. Closed. Now. Ah, sugar. Yeah, we are getting it on the underside of the hood here. Right there is where the grease mark is. So the positive's touching, the negative is not. And you can't make the battery any lower. It is what it is. But it's a tall battery. Not that crazy tall though. It's just a Group 26. It's a normal battery. So I'll have to take some measurements and see what else is out there. This is a dirt cheap, like the cheapest Walmart battery you can get. But this will work also in the Impala and the Chevelle. So it's not like I wasted money on it. But just a very, very tiny kiss of the positive terminal. So the fuel line is all connected, all done, turned out pretty darn good. I also got the battery tray back in there, even though the positive terminal is just kissing the insulation under the hood, it'll still be fine for a little trip around the block. And I was pumped up. I was going to get the car off of the ramps and take it for a real quick spin. But then I discovered this. I thought it was good to do a quick pre-flight check of everything, and that includes my U-joints, and I was going to also grease the sender bearing. So I'm tightening up my U-joints here, and then I noticed one would not get tight. And it's this guy up here. Then I noticed, what the heck? We have a broken U-bolt. So we were this close to getting this thing out and around the block, but this time it's a broken U-bolt for the U-joint that's going to hold us back. I need to do some digging around here to see what I can find. I think I have something here that I can make work. I have an assortment of different U-bolts here that I think will work for this. I believe it's a 1310 U-joint, but I need to take some measurements to make sure. The other little thing is that positive terminal, the positive post on the battery. It makes it kisses the insulation on the underside of the hood. But for a little short trip around the block, I'm not very concerned about that at all. But for using this thing as actually driving it back and forth to work, using it to, go wherever, I do want to get a shorter battery, so I will look into that. But again, we were that close. So at least we got the fuel line all hooked up, and that's looking good. I'm anxious to get some fuel in the tank and fire this thing up to see that everything is good without any leaks. So thank you everybody for following along, and we'll see you real soon with this thing on the road.